Welcome to Farming for Health, where Farmer Lee Jones and I talk with leaders in food, farming, and health and wellness to spread knowledge and inspire a plant-forward future, starting now. Welcome to the Farming for Health podcast. I'm Dr. Amy Sapola, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Mickey Bakst. He is the co-founder of Ben's Friends. Welcome, Mickey. Thanks for being here.
No, more importantly, thank you for having me and talking about the subject of Ben's Friends.
Yes, and I really want you to tell us just your story of how did you come to form Ben's Friends and why?
Well, first, I need to tell you what Ben's Friends is, I think, and
Yeah.
let your audience know. Ben's Friends is a group of sober chefs, bartenders, line cooks, servers around the country who have come together to help each other find a path to sobriety and along the way help anybody in the restaurant industry and hospitality industry who is struggling with addiction. We have one purpose, and that's to help the struggling addict find that path to a rich, fulfilling, and sober life.
And I know this kind of all stemmed from your own personal story as well. Are you able to share that with us too?
No,
No.
just joking, just joking. Yeah, I don't, I can share. I'm an open book. The bottom line of it is I am a hardcore drug addict and drunk who owned a restaurant in Newport Beach, California. As your guest can't tell, but I'm a bit older. I'm a 48-year veteran of restaurants. I owned a restaurant in Newport Beach, California. I love to party. I love to play. My playing at a very early age became not play, but necessity. I drank, drugged, did everything imaginable, functioning as a restaurateur until I no longer functioned. And eventually, I lost my restaurant to alcohol and drugs. Eventually, I found myself in a straitjacket in a nut house due to alcohol and drugs. Eventually, I had a DOA experience on an emergency room table because of alcohol and drugs. And eventually, I had to sober up. It was really simple for me. I had a ball doing drugs. Hear me clearly. I had a ball drinking. I loved owning a nightclub dinner house. It was magical. We were right on the beach in Newport Beach, California. It was phenomenal. But one day that love turned to a desperate necessity to stay high. And at that point, my life tumbled into absolute chaos. I stole from my employees. I stole from my partner. I stole from my next door neighbor. Life was absolutely hell. And I had no choice. I either was going to get sober, or I was going to kill somebody, or I was going to die, or the worst thing that frightened me the most, I was going to end up in a nut house in a straitjacket for the rest of my life. And I got sober in 1982. And at that time, I was confronted. The only way and the path at the time was AA, which I love greatly and think is an incredible thing, and it saved my life. But at that time, that was the only thing. And people in AA would tell me I had to leave the industry I love, which is hospitality, restaurants. I'm a maitre d'. I may have owned restaurants, but I'm a maitre d'. I love the magic of serving the food that the chefs who use your products create. I love carrying that dish to the table and handing it to the guest and watching their expression. I love the magic of walking through a dining room to greet somebody. And I didn't want to quit. And so I went from the nightclub dinner house to going into fine dining. And it was a tough struggle. But through the years, I watched countless people destroy their career. I was fortunate. I got sober early on, but I lived through the 80s sober. I lived through the celebrity chef explosion sober. I saw people who everybody knows crawling on the floor. I watched people who were talented as the greatest chefs in the country die. I watched people destroy their families, their lives, their careers. And I watched it for years and years and years, and nobody wanted to do anything about it. Fast forward, fast forward to 2016. So fast forward, there's two incidences. My co-founder is named Steve Palmer. He has a restaurant group called the Indigo Road Hospitality Group. They have about 32 restaurants with probably 100 more scheduled. I got no idea. Steve has done a remarkable job. And Steve and I would meet every week and just talk about life, talk about sobriety in the restaurant industry. And we always ended up talking about somebody else who had screwed up their career or died. And two things happened. One happened for me and one for Steve. First, with me, I was hosting a dinner, a celebration of the career of Danielle Ballou. And I had Andrew Carmelini there, and I had Gavin Kaysen there, and I had Michael Anthony there, and I had Norman Laprise from Canada there, and Ruth Reichel was there, and Nancy Silverton. It was a who's who of culinary icons. And I had a restaurateur close his restaurant to prepare an afternoon lunch for all of my guests. And there was a young chef in the kitchen with him, his chef de cuisine, named Drew Tusi. And they cooked a meal that honestly everybody was blown away. I mean, I still remember Danielle shaving truffles and Ruth going, "Oh my God, these kids are great," and blah, blah, blah. And the day that Drew cooked a meal for his icons, the people he dreamt about meeting, he went home that night and he drank and drugged himself to death. On the night of the greatest meal of his career, years later, I still get tears in my eyes. He went home and I went to Steve and we talked about it on our Saturday morning get together. We both said, we've got to do something. And we both said we were too busy. And a couple of months later, Steve was opening a restaurant called Town Hall in Florence, South Carolina. And Steve had a chef who had worked with him years ago at a restaurant called Canoe in Atlanta. And the chef came to Florence to help Steve open the restaurant. And the chef died in a hotel room and didn't show up. And Steve was broken, just broken. And the two of us said, enough is enough. We have to do something. This issue has been going on in our industry for decades. But for decades, nobody was willing to talk about it. I told you in our pre-interview that there was an article written in 1998 about alcoholism, the secret in the restaurant industry. That secret grew and grew and grew, and it has exploded. And it has exploded since COVID. COVID really did a number on mental health and on addiction. And so Steve and I went to the media in Charleston and we said, and I beg you to forgive the arrogant sound of this, but we said, Steve Palmer and Mickey Bakst, we're going to be somewhere at this location every Sunday for anybody in the industry struggling with addiction. We had rather large names in the community, and the media was all willing to carry it. And on the first Sunday, all these people showed up and said, help. And Ben's Friends has grown around the country based on the concept of community. For me, the most important word, I'm not a religious guy. For me, the most important word in the language is we, W-E. And Ben's Friends has grown on the concept of we help each other. There's another side of Ben's Friends too. As those who are listening are in the industry, everybody knows that the industry is suffering from a tremendous lack of employees. There's a staffing shortage all across the country. And we were tired of seeing people who love the industry leaving because they thought they couldn't do it sober. And we're living proof that you can do it sober. We have beard-winning chefs. We have winemakers. We have 2 master ambassadors for major liquor brands. We have bartenders, waiters. We have people from all over who deal every day with alcohol, and they found a way to do it and love their profession. I think about Chef's Garden, and for me, I was in high-end fine dining. I was blessed to work with some of the greatest in our industry. I know Charlie Trotter was very instrumental with Lee in the very beginning. I was there when Charlie opened his restaurant, you know? So I've been around a long, long time. Chef's Gardens gave us a prop on which to create experiences for our guests. And I didn't want to see people in this industry have to say, no, I can't use that and other props anymore. I can't be in the restaurant. It's a nightmare to me. So that's my pitch. I don't know how it sounded, but what
Yeah.
the hell?
No, I think that is powerful. And I wanted to circle back to the impact of COVID. I know you mentioned the impact of COVID was really profound on the mental health of people working in the restaurant industry. Post COVID, how are people faring, and kind of what is the extent really of the problem? I know you kind of talked about that it's woven really throughout the industry, but can we dive a little bit more into the impact and kind of post COVID and then the extent of the problem? A note from our sponsor.
The Chef's Garden is a family-owned regenerative farm that grows the most flavorful and nutritious vegetables, herbs, and microgreens for culinary professionals and home cooks. For over 30 years, the Chef's Garden has supplied some of the world's finest chefs and restaurants. Now, through Farmer Jones Farm, the same delicious ingredients are available to home cooks in the United States to use and enjoy, delivered directly to their homes. The Chef's Garden mission is to grow exceptional vegetables, care for each other and the land, and inspire a vegetable-forward future. For more information, visit chefs-garden.com.
Well, what's the extent of the problem? You know, you can look at 14 different, I always say you get 10 Nobel Prize winners on economics or political science in a room, you'll get 10 different answers, right? It's
Yep.
just reality. But if you look at the figures that are coming out of the federal government and new things, there is an estimated 17 to 24% of restaurant people struggling with issues pertaining to drugs or alcohol. Let me say that again, 17 to 24%, depending on where you get your information. How impactful is that on the industry? Just figure it out. It's extraordinary. Up to 1 out of every 4 in the highest figures, employees in restaurants has some kind of problem with drugs or alcohol. It has made a tremendous impact on the industry, and that number's gotten as high after COVID. I mean, COVID was, you had people sitting in apartments. I don't need to tell anybody this. They were by themselves. They didn't know where they were going to get their money. They didn't know what they were going to do. They didn't know if their restaurants or any businesses were going to open. And what do you do if you have a propensity to drink and drug? You drink and drug more when you're isolated and alone. And COVID really, really fueled it, put kerosene on an already smoldering fire, you know?
Yeah.
And then frankly, I was just in DC and I walked into the Smithsonian Museum of Asian Art, and I was nauseated to find the name Sackler on the building. The people who created the opioid crisis with oxycodone, their name is on the building. But you have the accessibility of drugs that is street drugs that are everywhere. And it's worse than it's ever been due to one family, honestly. And you've got a cocktail of bad. I don't know how else to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you talk about doing it sober, like in any role that you are in the restaurant industry, you can do it sober. I find that really intriguing, especially when it comes to being a winemaker or a bartender. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that might look like?
Joyful, joyous.
Right.
I don't know what else. I was at a Ben's Friends meeting yesterday, and a kid came in, 28 years old. I mean, screwed up, seriously screwed up. And his restaurant still allowed him to have pre-shift cocktail. They all got together and had a shot of booze before. They drank through the shift or snorted coke or did whatever they did. And at the end of the night, they took victory laps with shots of booze, right? He didn't believe that it could be done any other way. People in the industry don't. So let me tell you something. I have, and I don't want to sound like I'm bragging. I have had a blessed career, really fortunate. I have sober stood next to the greatest icon chefs of the last 20 years. Sober. I have done dinner with the greatest winemakers in the world, literally sober. I have stood next to the greatest liquor makers, distillers, sober. I have done dinners for presidents, kings, rock stars, billionaires, millionaires, and mom and dad who have saved money all year to come to my restaurant, sober. And I have had an absolute ball. I have loved every minute of it. So what does it look like sober? It looks so much better than it did when I drank and drug. And it does for everybody who gets sober.
Where do you think
Was that a good answer for you?
Yeah, that is a great answer. Where do you think someone who feels like they may have a problem, but they don't even know where to start, where do they start?
Well, the reality is they have to take an action. There has to be action taken. You're a doctor. I'm sick. If I don't do anything, nothing's going to happen. Ben's Friends Hope is our website. Reach out. Look at the meetings. We do national Zoom meetings every single day with people from all over the country attending, all over the country. Reach out. Reach out to me. I'm the guy that receives the emails. I'll call you right away. we will put people around you to help you. Reach out to AA. I absolutely love AA. I swear by it. And though I don't go anymore because I've been sober a long ass time, but I recommend it. Reach out to somebody you know who's sober and say, I need help. It starts with I need help and
Yeah.
looking for the help. Like I said, Ben's Friends Hope .com, we will reach back out immediately to anybody who's reaching out. AA has a 24-hour helpline. There's other organizations too, but just you gotta take that first step.
A note from our sponsor. Farming for Health is brought to you by Farmer Jones Farm at the Chef's Garden. Farmer Jones Farm provides nutritious, regeneratively grown vegetables to home cooks nationwide. If you are searching for vegetables grown in a way that's healthy for you and good for the planet, try a curated box from Farmer Jones Farm. Get 15% off your order with the code FarmingForHealth15. Yeah, and I think that you mentioned earlier the power of we and community. Can you talk a little bit more about why that community support is really necessary when you're trying to
Because
get
we're
sober?
isolationists.
Yeah.
We tend to live in darkness, us addicts. We tend to pull down the shades, turn off the phones, lock the door, and hide in the corners of our dark rooms because that's what our addictions do to us. And we cannot. Everybody I know who has crossed the line into addiction, we try countless things on our own, and they never work. My favorite for me was the NyQuil cure. I would drink 3 bottles of NyQuil, and I would tell people, wow, I didn't have a drink last night, but the stuff knocked me out, right? I mean, we tried different times that we wouldn't use, different days that we wouldn't use, different concoctions. I had an overdose once and had my stomach pumped, and I thought, well, the problem was I just mixed a little bit of this too much with that. Next time I won't do this, but I didn't think maybe I should stop. We live in isolation. We have to come out into the light. And the we are those that help guide us through the light. Ben's Friends is different than AA. AA has a 12-step program that I believe is phenomenal. Ben's Friends has a community, and what you get from a community is you see people who have gone before you and walked through the hell that you've walked through and are now walking a different path, and they tell you how they did it. And together you can do it. I've never been able to do these things on my own.
I think that's a really important point to make. And for people not to feel alone either, that there are other people who have done it and who can help kind of guide the way.
Yeah.
So as far as types of support that Ben's Friends provides, I know you talked about the community, but what sort of resources do you provide with Ben's Friends?
We provide community.
Yeah.
Honestly, we provide. Somebody can't. Charlotte and Brody came in to their first Ben's Friends meeting yesterday. Charlotte and Brody. By the time the meeting was over, within 15 minutes, I had talked to both of them. They were both handed a list of names and numbers of people who would be there if they reached out. Those names and numbers each got Charlotte and Brody's phone number so that they can reach out. And I know as a fact that 24 hours later, they have both talked to at least 3 different people
Wow.
who have helped them out. And I know because they came to the Ben's Friends meeting today and they've said, we're back. You know, we help people. I want to be really clear. We believe in AA. We help people go to AA. The 28 cities that we're live in, they know people will take somebody to an AA meeting too. Sit there. We have people who are much more committed to AA and they'll work with them. But the biggest thing we provide them are people like themselves to help them. So there's really no other resources.
Yeah, no, I think that's a resource in itself, just that connection, and having those people that you know you can call and that are calling you. Yeah, really, really powerful. So our podcast is called Farming for Health, and I wanted to ask you, what does the term farming for health mean to you?
You know, I have to be honest, I hadn't thought about it, but the first thing that I think about is not pertaining to the actual act of farming, but reaching out to find the tools that you need to be well. We all have different paths, everyone, you know? And so when you said farming for health, that was the first thing I thought of, is finding the tools, searching for them, and finding the tools and learning how to use them to get you back to where you want to be.
I think that's one of the best answers I've heard. That's a great
Really?
answer. All right. So I'm sure our listeners are going to want to find out more about you and Ben's Friends. Can you tell us where we can find you online and in Charleston?
Yes. Online, it's bensfriendshope.com. And the easiest way to find me is where it says contact. Everything comes past me. Others look at it, but everything gets to me to see. My role is to talk about how Ben's Friends can help all of the participants. You know, Lee creates magnificent vegetables that give people nourishment. We try to nourish them in a different way. And that's what my message is. We're here to help. When he started this business, I mean, how long has Chef's Gardens been around when Lee's been really active? It's been
more than 30
40
years. Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah, more than 30 years. So,
yeah. I mean, I remember it way back when in the 80s, late 80s, I believe. Am I correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. You know, I'd lost my train of thought, but Lee has been nourishing people all of this time. We want to pick up that mantle. And 30 years from now, I want people to say that guy may be dead, but you know what? He nourished a lot of us in this industry.
Oh, yeah. That's so powerful. And I think you're doing amazing work. And we're just really honored to have you come to the Roots Conference. And I think it's really important for the industry that you're out there spreading your message and really giving people hope and connection to find help and sobriety. So any last words you'd like to leave our audience with today?
Honestly, I have been with restaurants that have used Chef's Gardens for years and years and years. I have had products that have blown my mind. The home kit that you guys started during COVID, you open that up and it's like you're a kid in a candy store. So and then, you know, Jamie Simpson, as I told you, has a special place in my heart. So to be able to be part of this, spread the message of Ben's Friends, and celebrate the miracle that is Chef's Gardens is just a real honor for me.
Oh, well, thank you. It's, like I said, an honor for us to have you here. So thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Amy.
Thank you for listening to Farming for Health. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Connect with Farmer Lee Jones and I on Instagram and Facebook.